every Tuesday, we are joined by Dr. Jeff Pierce from Michigan Sports and Spine Center. He is our injury insider. And Dr. Pierce, as a parent, youth sports, you had a kind of a youth sports experience over the previous weekend, I guess. I have kids in youth sports too, and this is something I've been wanting to get into it with you to some degree. You had kind of a comment on the intensity around youth sports, and I want to hear your story. And then I have one as well that made my wife stop going to my son's competitions. But what did you observe over the weekend?
I've obviously my kids are a little bit older, but I've been dealing with youth sports since the training room and all the Red Wings, all the hockey over at Troy Sports Center since before some of you were born.
Sure.
But basically the intensity it's not getting better. It's getting a little bit worse. And I guess I don't want to open up a whole can of worms because this is a big can of worms.
No doubt, yeah.
Right? I mean, you're edgy. I'm sure some of the listeners are edgy. But basically, you got to put in perspective the pressure on these kids. We've talked about college athletes. Now I'm talking about high school athletes, junior high athletes, adolescents. You have to understand what the body's doing during this time. That's why it's more important. Usually by the time you get to college, your body's developed, you're building muscle, things like that. With the intensity of these sports, with the kid going through growth spurts, you got to understand, just to simplify life and what's going on in a kid, an adolescent, girls, it happens a little bit earlier. But as you grow, your bones are growing. Your muscles and ligaments and everything else is catching up.
Right.
So if you're this high intensity athlete working on a body that's going through a growth spurt, what really upset me is my assistant's husband was a big time baseball player. He was throwing a curveball when he was in 5th grade. Okay. So for all you people listening right now, you should not be throwing a curveball in 5th grade because all it's going to do is mess up your elbow and your shoulder. And what happened? He goes, I blew my shoulder out. I go, like in high school? He goes, no, 8th grade, I was pretty much done. I started playing lacrosse.
Wow.
Because we were talking about lacrosse. There's a kid in Maryland. Big, husky kid, probably had potential. But it's the unknown of what's going on. That's a lot of reasons why I even started doing my show on 97.1 is to educate these people because there was unnecessary injuries. So I'm jumping all over the place. But bottom line is, you got to understand where your child is and what age they're at. If they're going through a growth spurt, you want to actually tone it down. So one of the guys that works for me, I was watching his son play tennis. He's ranked top 10 in the state of Michigan, 14 years old, but he just had a growth spurt. So you can't push him heavy during that time because what you're going to do is you're going to wear on that joint. You're going to wear on those ligaments. You're going to create laxity. You create a bigger problem. It's not like these kids can just gain weight because you want them to gain weight.
Right.
There's a natural development of the child, natural metabolisms. I did it with my son. I mean, I'm like, we got to put weight on you. You got to put weight. He's playing varsity as a freshman at 135 pounds, playing against Brother Rice guys that are 240.
Yeah, right.
I mean, they would like push him halfway with the stick and he's blown over. I'm like, we got to put weight on you. So I've been guilty of it a little bit. Understand that you got to let the process happen, right? Because you're talking about major injuries. You're talking about a kid who's playing baseball baseball career was over in 8th grade because I just started asking him, and then I got really mad. It's like, what'd your coach do? Throw the curveball. I was pitching more pitches than we wanted. We talk about pitch count now. There is some proactive prevention.
Yeah, and that kind of backs up into it, and just kind of popped in my head when this was what we were going to talk about, because we have noticed, and I don't know if it's that we notice injuries more than in the past. My guess is there are more injuries than have been in the past. Is this kind of like the crop that has been planted from youth sports? And now we're kind of harvesting that crop because you talk about the intensity, right?
Right.
My son does jujitsu and jujitsu tournaments, and it is Hunger Games for children. And my wife went to one, and she's like, I'm not going back to that. Yeah. And I think about it too when I'm kind of in the arena, but being around sports for a living and stuff like that, I can kind of compartmentalize that and move past it.
Right.
She can't. But the intensity that is in there, the weight that's on youth sports today, it's insane, number one. But number two, is this kind of the time and space we're in, and with injuries in professional sports, is this becoming like a byproduct of the youth sports system, or am I crazy with that?
You're almost right on.
Wow.
Right? So what are we doing, right? There's so, and I always go back to the dollar. When we talk about the NFL, we got to follow the dollar.
Right.
The dollar is there, right? Your kid has to be, like I was hockey. I was big time hockey, right? We took care of all youth hockey. Everybody was the next Steve Yzerman. They came to me because I was a doctor for that system. But the realistic expectations sometimes is pushed harder from the parents than it is from the child.
Oh, no doubt.
Right?
Yeah.
And now it's like, well, if I don't put him in, if I don't give him training, if I don't do this, it's like you got to follow the natural. There's natural ability, and then there's, work hard ability, right? So you just have to have someone smart enough that has a vested interest in what's good for the child. Like this young boy who's playing, he just had a growth spurt. You can't keep pushing him heavy. He probably lost the tournament just because he fatigued because of his ligaments and his muscle. They don't have that development ready. And there is an advantage to these kids that look at LeBron. LeBron matured. He was 25 at the age of 18. Right. So there's some natural stuff going on. We had a kid playing football that I met at a graduation party this past weekend. He's just naturally huge. Yeah, he's 6'5", I'm guessing probably 250. So he's naturally huge. But all those other, they're fighting to get ahead. So what are we saying? You have to be aware of, one, the growth spurt. You have to be aware of natural physiology in adolescent kids. Adolescent athletes are a whole different breed. Women are especially. You see a lot of gymnastics. You see a lot of figure skaters. You see a lot of tennis players. They're pushing their sport at a much younger age. They're peaking at a much earlier age. Are they doing damage to the body? 100%. How to balance that? You now have a trainer. You now have a coach. You now have all these things for any guys that are in the top 100. You got to get to the top 100. Now you need to get to the top 50. There's a lot of competition on these poor kids. I'm pushing too hard. I don't know if I made my point, though.
No, because, for real, though, it literally just clicked inside my head when we had this discussion, because now the guys that have come up and that are in the pros, they were kind of a byproduct of this youth sports move, because youth sports stopped being, for fun
Yeah.
around the year 2000-ish,
maybe earlier, but
maybe a little. But
when
you get
I
my
was
point.
a kid, we did everything.
Yeah, right. But that's my point, though, and I never really thought about it before, but I'm sure it has some fingerprints on the injury structure of professional sports now.
But you do. It's like the commitment. Again, he's an elite athlete, but they're homeschooling him. He's playing 24/7. He's putting 50 to 70 hours a week of training. And that's what you need to get to the next level. I understand that, right? You need to do it, but we need to do it with balance. We need to do it with an education of cross-training, allowing him to settle down and allow his body to physically develop. He may lose the edge those 6 months, but the next 6 months he should be able to excel again. So it's a tough call, and I'm there. I'm inside it. I'm outside it. But after watching this tennis thing, the intensity of the families, the questions that were coming up to ask, what happened? There was some drama going on. There's emotional, mental states going on. Tennis is a tough sport. It's not the Wii sport. It's the I sport, and it's intense. So
Woodward Sports chat thread, Dad with Tourette says, yes, natural ability is a key as well as genetics, but when you get those, the work ethic is what's needed to be great. No doubt about that, but we're just kind of talking about how it is, man. It's youth sports is Hunger Games now, Flannel, and you'll see this. You're newly married. I'm sure you guys will get the family going. I'm just be prepared. I guess what Doc and I are saying is be prepared.
No,
don't underestimate it.
Yeah. I've heard it before, and I'm sure I'll hear it again. I'm sure I'll experience it. And Dr. Pierce, speaking of youth sports, you mentioned that curveballs, like kids throwing them at too young of an age, can ruin a kid's pitching career before it even gets started. Are there any off-speed pitches that are more arm safe when you're young, or should they just be throwing fastballs up until high school?
they should be. It's the mechanics. It's the understanding of the mechanics. You're gonna have kids that are naturally. And he told me, he goes, I was practicing my curveball. I watched the YouTube video and I was doing it, but he wasn't doing it correctly. He knew about the hand thing, to flip your hand, but he didn't realize what was going on at his shoulder and his elbow. Is there safe? Yeah, a fastball, good mechanics with a good coach, and it's proper posture. Like, I'm looking around these kids. I mean, these are elite tennis kids. I would say 20%, 25% had proper posture. And what does proper posture lead to? When you're changing mechanics, I can't remember the tennis player that's just so rolled it forward, the crazy guy. You guys know who I'm talking about? Who like throws fits on the court.
John McEnroe back in the day.
Back in the day, McEnroe. Yeah. Anyhow, it's just that roll folder, their shoulders are rolled forward, their neck is down. That just lends to an injury coming because your mechanics is natural, the old school military thing, put the book on your head and walk. There was a reason for that because your body's being developed and it's best for the mechanics to be in that natural position. Your spine being in a natural position, your neck, your shoulders. But a lot of these kids will roll shoulder and the neck down. That's probably because they're Texan and on their gaming. But it's going to be a problem.
Talk with Dr. Jeff Pierce here, our injury insider from the Michigan Sport and Spine Center. You got time for one more, Doc? Because and this is wild, and I do this to you all the time, and I'll put you on the spot about something you don't know. A lot of people have been talking about the Stanley Cup Finals now.
Love it.
And Florida Panthers and Leon Draisaitl with the shot on Alexander Barkov. He has a broken jaw, and he's been ruled out, right? He's been ruled out of the rest of the Stanley day-to-day for the rest of the Stanley Cup Finals. You don't know the technicalities of it, but I'm going to ask you anyway because you're here.
Okay.
Like a broken jaw, that seems to me like something a hockey player would just cage up the face and roll with, right? Is that possible? Am I expecting too much?
It's a badge of honor, a broken jaw. But yeah, I mean, it depends on how many breaks there are. If it was displaced, if he's getting wired shut. I saw the hit. It wasn't that aggressive of a hit, but he went down as a big guy going out. It depends on how, is it multiple fractures? Can they plate it? Yeah, knowing hockey players, he's probably in surgery right now, getting wired or plated if it's a true fracture with multiple, and he'll probably wear a cage and come back because
he's in surgery now. They play again in 2 days.
Yeah, I mean
he'll be back.
There's no look.
Why are they built
Dr.
different?
John Finley was one of the greatest hockey player doctors ever. I think he's in the Hall of Fame. He's in the Hall of Fame for most stitches. Every Red Wing of yesterday has a story of Finley going back into the locker room, stitching him up, and they were back within 5 to 10 minutes after being stitched up. I mean, it's a joke, the badge of honor, but this is a badge of honor for these guys to play with injuries. And you don't hear about them. This one was obvious, but like I've said multiple times when Darren's here, how many injuries were reported the day after they were done?
Right.
And that's hockey.
They're just cut different, man.
They're cut different. I'm going to play. And these guys are on the brink of something that, have never, to raise the Stanley Cup is the ultimate. I had the fortunate chance of being, with the cup a couple times here.
Yeah.
So it's I'd be surprised if he doesn't. If it's multiple fractures and a lot of wiring, if we can pull that news, I'll give more of an update of what I think. But
all right. We'll check
I would
back in.
I would not bet against it. He's out for the season.
Yeah. All right. We'll check back in with that. Doc, appreciate your time as always, my friend.
I was going to talk about Pozinga.
Oh, Porzingis? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it was on your show or on Braylon's show that I predicted he's going to be back. He's healthy. And he's going to be a mean streak in him and do very well. And I think that's.
And Flannel should have took the 50-1 for him to be the MVP series. MVP of the series.
I don't know about that.
I don't know. Drew Holiday's coming on strong. Jaylen Brown. That'll be an interesting discussion to have for another day when the finals actually does conclude. If Boston wins, who will be finals MVP?
Yeah.
Not Tatum.
At this rate, no. Not Tatum.
Definitely not Tatum.
Tatum's a role player now.
Yeah. Good call on the Porzingis thing, though. You drilled that one. All right, Doc, as always, appreciate the time, my friend. Talk again next Tuesday. There he is, Dr. Jeff Pierce, everybody, Michigan Sports and Spine Center. He is our injury insider.